sure it wouldn't be beneath him. Well, maybe it would, I don't know.
Good evening, everyone. It's a little after 6:30. We have a quorum. And let's see, I'll say who is here. Well, virtually, we have Chana Keofana, and absent is David White and Mike Casberg, and all other members are in chambers. So with that, I'll call the meeting to order, and I'll ask if there are any public comments for people in the room or people out there in the virtual stratosphere. Hearing none, we'll move on. And the next item is the approval of minutes from the February 9th meeting. Hopefully, everybody's had a chance to read them, and thank you to Nicole for getting those out. Are there any comments, omissions, additions? Seeing none, we'll have to do a roll call. Natalie?
Motion and second.
What's that?
Motion and
Oh,
second.
motion to approve the minutes. Thank you, George. Seconded. Roll call, please.
John,
Yay, yay, sorry, yay.
Tyrell, Chenna,
Yes.
Natalie,
Yes.
Nicole is yes, George,
Yes.
and Bill.
Aye. So that vote is 7-0. Thank you very much. The next item on here is the presentation by the Department of Public Works. As many you know, we've done deep dives over the past year and a half or so and covered a lot of the major functions of government. And tonight, DPW was nice enough to come here. I believe they're giving a presentation that Mr. Cannareggi gave to the council not too long ago. So it's a good night to see all the facets of what the DPW does and ask all the questions you've ever wanted to ask about roads and recycling and so forth. So without further ado, the folks from DPW could just introduce yourself so at least we know up here.
Good evening, my name is Derek Adams, I'm the Environmental Affairs Superintendent.
Okay,
Doug Martin, the Water and Sewer Superintendent.
okay, thank you, Doug.
And I'm Kathy Morad, the Budget and Administration Manager for
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so whoever wants to take the lead on this?
Clicker.
Alicia's gonna do the
Are you-
slides, right?
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
slide
Okay.
through,
Okay.
that's right.
Derek's gonna start and then I'll jump in.
Yep, so you can go to the first
Yep.
slide. So Franklin at a glance, population of 33,500, 290 lane miles of roadways, total land mass of 27 square miles with 4 miles of impervious area. So quickly what that means is that we have 4 square miles non-contiguous in the town of Franklin that's not accepting water into the aquifer that will be recharging where we draw our water from, and Doug's gonna get into that a little later. Like I just said, all of our drinking water is supplied from the ground. We have 160 miles of water work pipe, 148 miles of sewer work pipe, and 128 miles of drain pipe. In addition to that, for our drainage system, we have over 7,000 catch basins, which is the temporary storage and conveyance structure for any rainwater or precipitation that makes its way onto the roadway. That structure will convey the stormwater into pipe, which ultimately gets discharged into the environment to any number of the 600 outfalls around town. None of Franklin's stormwater is treated, and each outfall at its individual location may or may not have a treatment structure, but there's no formal treatment like the sewage that gets discharged and sent over to the Charles River Pollution Control District. Additionally, there is 200 treatment basins, and those include rain gardens, tree wells, storm scepters, and infiltration chambers.
Questions?
So looking at the operating budget, the general fund just over $6.1 million, and the utilities at $14.6 million for a total of $20.7. 60-plus employees, that includes full-time employees, permanent part-time employees, and seasonal employees, each dispersed amongst the 7 divisions. Throughout the capital budget, that's approximately $5 million for the Chapter 90 and the annual capital appropriation. Additionally, looking at the bottom right, the ARPA and the Rebuild America, we expect that to be about $2 to $2.5 million over the next 2 fiscal years. Looking at the administration division, $442,000. That is a lot of the behind-the-scenes work for the DPW. All of the road work that we do, so much of the engineering is done within that administration division. GIS division, which all of this work that we do needs to be documented for future reference. So if an issue comes up, we need to have a reference point for what we're going to attempt to improve or reconstruct or retrofit. So that's very important to have all of that well documented so we can easily reference those documents so that we can make the appropriate course of action. Construction design, oversight and inspections, permitting, utility billings. Grant writing is here under administration, but we have a tremendously talented group of people. And from the water and sewer, they get their grants. The administration folks get grants. The excuse me, the recycling center gets grants. So we're heavy on the grant writing for sure. We get a lot of money for that, and it's very helpful for each division. Budget forecasting, payroll, and streetlights. Additionally, we're requesting a junior engineer to handle the increased workload that's expected from the ARPA funding and the Rebuild America funding. The funding is, of course, it's great, but it does put a strain on the current employees. So it seems as if it would be better for us to hire a junior engineer to keep some of that work in-house as opposed to contracting it out, in which case it would cost more money if we contracted it out. The grounds division, this is something I hold near and dear because I did 2 years summer help here when I was in college and then worked 8 years full-time at there because I liked it so much at that time. So I know the ins and outs of this department, tremendously talented individuals. They do so much work around town. It's really unbelievable the scope of work that they're able to accomplish with the resources they have. So the maintenance of every park around town, and that includes the non-traditional parks like Delcarts and the Sculpture Park and even Ferrara's Market parking lot, keep a lot of areas nice and clean. Additionally, all of the ball fields around town, which are at your more traditional parks like Dacey's and Fletcher Field. Additionally, on top of that, the maintenance for all grounds for public buildings and the schools. Looking at the street care from the perspective of the grounds division, they do what you could call urban street care, arboriculture, arbor care. What they do is the care and maintenance of all the street trees, a lot of pruning, some hazard tree removal, and additionally we have incorporated tree wells into a lot of the roadway reductions. So what we do is we make sure that those are appropriately sized and replaced if they need replacing. Additionally, there's no funding plan for the extensive maintenance of the town's trail system, so that's what we're going to look for in the future, taking care of that. And moving on to the highway division. The operating budget for the highway division, $1.4 million, all of the roadway and sidewalk maintenance, not installation, not reconstruction, it's a maintenance division. Additionally, a lot of that equipment gets used for snow removal operations. All of the signs around town, we do that all in-house. It saves a tremendous amount of money. Instead of contracting that out, whenever we need a sign, we have the software and we have the printing machine necessary, so we get the sign blanks. We print all of the templates out, and then we put them up, and we do it all in-house, and it saves a lot of money. Line painting, and another thing that we are able to do in-house, which saves quite a bit of money. But this does not include any funds for new road construction. And several years ago, there was a motion to have a override to increase the funding for this, and it did not go through. So we're still dealing with the effects of that. There's approximately $750,000 backlog in the town parking lot alone and $40 million in road work in general. So we are additionally requesting to restaff the 2 employees that were cut from the FY22 budget because we're going to have a lot of work coming up and we really need to make sure that we're adequately staffed. Central Motors, just under $1 million. They maintain all of the town vehicles, which includes public work, police, fire, facilities, and the town staff. That includes 167 registered vehicles, but what that does not include is all the weed whackers, leaf blowers, lawn mowers, pavers, rollers, hoppers, tractors, and snow blowers. And additionally, anything that we need fabricated, for example, if a culvert is clogged and we don't have a tool, or anybody has a tool to remove that object, we have the mechanics fabricate something in-house, saves money, and it gets the job done. So tremendously talented individuals over there.
That's all done with a staff of 3.
Yes, 3 individuals.
3
Yep.
individuals.
Looking at the snow and ice budget, coming out of the general fund, just over $1 million, and that's on par with the 5-year average that we've run over time. 190 miles of roadway, that we have to clear and 60 miles of sidewalk, a tremendous task for everyone to do. When we have all hands on deck, that includes over 100 pieces of equipment. There's 16 different salting routes, and it's underfunded in the operational budget. Right now, we're at $1.25 million, so currently over.
By underfunded, I mean, that's by design. I think you probably heard it in the past, snow and ice is one of those things that, you know, that can go over budget, that the town can go budget.
That's this year, right? 1.25?
One point,
Is that spent or?
Yes, that's what we've spent through today, essentially.
The Stormwater Division. So the operating budget, coming out of the general fund, just under $1 million. And you'll see a lot of bullet points there, and what each of them should really say is enhanced, because these are things that we've been doing over time, over the last several decades. But each of these items, as mandated by the federal government, needs to be increased in scope and size. So we need to do enhanced street sweeping, enhanced catch basin cleaning, and enhanced culvert maintenance and drainage improvements, as well as retrofits for retention pond, forebay, and rain garden maintenance. So this is a big item that's coming up, and it's gonna get bigger. And something that's not listed here, which really needs to be noted, is the phosphorus control plan, or known as the PCP. Because we're in the Charles River watershed, and we discharge, as I noted on the second slide, a lot of our outfalls, all of our outfalls discharge into the environment, and because we're within the Charles River watershed, we need to reduce the amount of phosphorus that's being contributed to that river. Now, the easiest way to visualize phosphorus is when leaves fall, they land on the road, they get pulverized by vehicles, it rains, those get washed into a catch basin, they sit there, and they just act as, when additional water comes in with those leaves, it basically acts as phosphorus tea, and that just creates any additional water that comes in, it just discharges phosphorus into the environment, which is exactly what we need to stop from happening to abide by the phosphorus control plan. That's why we need to do enhanced street sweeping, to keep those leaves from getting in there in the first place. We need to clean the catch basins more frequently to get anything that's in there out. And we need to create more treatment structures to reduce the amount of phosphorus that's entering the environment in the Charles River watershed. So that's a tall order, and we are currently in year 4. Every 5 years is a new permit, so we're really expecting some changes after next fiscal year, and the phosphorus control plan is going to be a massive part of that. The solid waste and recycling utility, which I also oversee. So the utility of $2.5 million, that's for the curbside program, and the general fund of $217, that's for the recycling center. We have 9,600 customers on the curbside pickup, and just over 3,000 recycling center customers that are very passionate about the recycling, and it's great. It's great to see. We have 15 vendors up there. We recycle everything from asphalt, brick, and concrete, to porcelain, to metal, rigid plastic, styrofoam, leaves, brush, oil, antifreeze, batteries, electronics, tires, just about anything you can recycle, we accept up there.
Thanks, Eric. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
So, like trash and recycling, that's a user-based utility, so the user, you know, if you're a user, you pay a fee for it. Same thing with wastewater utility. There's a fee associated, and we're about a $5.3 million. Majority of that budget we pay towards Charles River Watershed Pollution Control District. Then we have about 7,700 customers, 120 miles of sewer mains, 3,300 sewer manholes, 23 lift stations, and generally our average daily use is somewhere around 2.7 million gallons per day. Picture on the bottom actually is the, you might have recognized it from the Beaver Street interceptor back in about almost over 100 years ago now. And that's our big project that we have coming up. It's in design right now. We're about 60% of the way through. And that's looking, we got SRF funding approval for it. So hopefully we'll be bidding that in August is our time frame. It's similar to the drinking water utility, again, a user-based fee. Our operating budget there is just over $6 million. We have about 9,700 customers in town, 160 miles of water mains, 13 wells in total. Like Derek said in one of the earlier slides, we are the largest groundwater producer in the state of Massachusetts. So all our water comes from those 13 wellheads. We have 2 treatment facilities. So we have the older treatment plant over on Fisher Street, right behind the DPW admin building. We have the brand new Grove Street water treatment facility as well. We have 6 water tanks, equaling about 13 million gallons of storage, 7 booster stations, over 600 backflow devices, with an average daily use of about 2.6 million gallons. And a peak day in the summer is probably around 3.8 or so. Next slide. So those are all our kind of our divisions between what Derek and I went through. Now we kind of want to go over some of our funding and cost concerns coming up. So expenses. So unlike other town departments like library, police, and others, are which most of their costs are fixed. Personnel cost. Majority for DPW as a whole is expenses. So we're about plus or minus 70% on just expenses. Things that we're dealing with on a funding and cost concerns are inflation. I think everyone's dealing with it, and we all see it at the pump. And what we're paying, when we go to the grocery store. Same thing for all the supplies and parts and everything that we need to do our daily operations. We're all seeing it with inflation. Volatility and product costs. Salt is a great example. I think Kathy was telling me that up to today, our salt costs. So we had used about the same amount of salt from last year up to today, but that costs an extra 200,000. 100,000. Sorry. So you can see right there, just in that alone, if we use the same amount this year, it costs $100,000 more. Gas is, again, one of those as well. Fortunately, we've been able to take advantage of new funding and grants that are coming along. So ARPA is one of them. We've been able to, looks like we're going to be able to move up one of our water main capital plan roads to this year. So we're going to be bidding that soon. And then Grove Street, we got that MassWorks grant for Grove Street. So those are all good funding sources there. Right now, we're looking at procurement and bidding is, I think this year and maybe start of next year will be okay. But I think now, because of all the money that's coming into the market for all these infrastructure projects, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty, and we're actually already seeing with procurement some of the supplies, the pipe that we need for water main construction. You name it, it's harder to get. So what used to take maybe 6 weeks to get a load of pipe, now sometimes it's 30 weeks. So, and that's, I can only assume it's going to get worse. Like I just said, availability of materials and parts. Some of our other concerns are staffing and worker concerns. Increased responsibilities. We really haven't increased the amount of staff, but what we need to do is always increasing. So that's always something that is a concern of ours. Reduced staff. Last year we lost 2 positions when we, broke out the stormwater utility. It looks like, I think we're bringing those two positions back, as well as a junior engineer, as Derek had said. Changing workforce, economy and inflation, benefits, availability, retainage. It's not the same anymore. I mean, it's hard to keep people, in the door. We're dealing with private sector who's paying a lot more, and especially right now, there's a lot of money out there in construction. So we have guys leaving for that, unfortunately. License requirements, CDL requirements of changing. Now you need to be trained by or certified that you were trained. So that's something that we're dealing with and trying to figure out. Water and wastewater license requirements. It's getting very hard to find licensed treatment operators. Fortunately, the town has done a really good job of, bringing someone on who might have an interest in it, and we'll train them up. But it's very hard to bring someone else, like, who already has licenses into town. Contractors and outsourcing, those are always options. I think we do a lot of work in-house with the crew that we have. But, as things, as more as expected, outsourcing and bringing on contractors might be one of the things to look at. And collective bargaining, that contract ends this fiscal year, so that'll be upcoming too. On the regulatory front, drinking water quality, that's near and dear to my heart. Iron and manganese, we're doing really well, I think, now that we have Grove Street Water Treatment Plant online. We're doing a really good job of removing the iron and manganese from the system, from the source. And then PFAS. So originally when this was given in to the council about a month ago or so, we're actually looking really good. But recently at Well 7, we had an increase hit. So unfortunately, we had to shut that well down, and we're trying to figure out where it's coming from. So right now, we're doing some exploratory stuff.
One quick interruption, Doug.
Sure.
PFAS?
PFAS.
What does that stand for?
Pure fluoridated substances. So basically, like Teflon, like
Firefighting foam.
firefighting foam, Scotch Guard, stuff like that. It's a man-made, science-created, combination of fluorides together in a carbon chain.
Polyfluoroalkyl solutions.
Yes.
Thank you. So just to not make it look like the water sewer superintendent didn't know what he was talking about, it's just really hard to pronounce.
It's really
I
hard to
get
say.
it, I get
I
it.
can't say it. Yeah.
Hence
Okay.
why a good acronym, a good government acronym, PFAS,
Sometimes
easy to
they're good,
remember,
sometimes
right?
they're good.
OPEB, we don't know, but PFAS, we're good.
Yeah.
Great, thanks, Jamie.
Thank you,
Okay,
Jamie.
Thank you. Keep going.
So we're dealing with that. And then who knows from drinking water quality? I think PFAS is the thing right now, but they've always talked about regulating manganese. But I think in overall the town's sitting pretty with that for right now. And then the MS4 permit. So Derek had mentioned the phosphorus control plan. We're in year 4 of the 5-year permit. So those, what we need to do is going to be increasing year to year from that. So I think that was next one. So in summary, issues aren't going away. I think, we've gone after a lot of the low-hanging fruit, as Bruce likes to say. Water and sewer upgrades, those are going to be consistently needed. And we need to spend money, on the capital side in order to save money on the operating side. So the town's done a really good job of continuing to do those things, but we can't stop. We need to continue to do those things. Asset management planning, we've done a good job of that. Use of technology, that's especially on the water side, and I know the GIS on the stormwater side. We're going to continue to use technology to our advantage. Outsourcing as warranted. Like I said, everything's costing more, so it might be something that we need to do. Improved equipment. I think the town's done a really good job of, making sure that we have really good equipment safely, that's safe to use and operate. We have a lot of older stuff too that we need to continue to upgrade. So, an improved workforce. So I think I want to give a shout out to all our DPW workers. They do a really good job for the amount of staff that we have, and the amount of work that we need to do for the town. So, with that, we'll take some questions.
I have a bunch, but I'll let the other members of the committee go first. Mr. Vice Chairman was going to go first.
I have a list too. I heard you say that we don't treat any stormwater,
That's,
and yet every time I listen to the planning board, they talk constantly about treating runoff from the particular development lot? Is that,
So I guess
Is that
I
because-
summed,
is it-
sorry, but
does it not get into, because it doesn't go into our drainage? Is that why
I
it's
can
not?
try and clarify that. So what I meant by that is that much like our sewage gets treated by the Charles River Pollution Control District in a highly regulated, controlled process, and then that gets discharged to acceptable limits, whatever's discharged from Charles River Pollution Control has been treated with chemical and physical processes. When I say our stormwater isn't treated, I simply mean that the water that comes and hits the roadways and the impervious surfaces, they go into our pipes. When they get discharged into the environment, there are treatment structures that we have, such as an infiltration chamber, which might be buried under the ground, which slowly lets the water leach back in. We have rain gardens, which accept the water and treat the water as, it's treated as it's filtered through, but it's not a physical process like a treatment plant, as it would be removing contaminants to a predetermined level. It doesn't treat the water in that sense. What it does is aid in the process of removing the, I guess you'd say, low-hanging fruit, the easy contaminants, the larger contaminants that get filtered through those layers of soil before they go back into the groundwater.
So it's not treated by some mechanical means, it's a natural treatment, lack of a better term, I guess.
I'd say that's accurate, yes.
You mentioned grants. Do we know the dollar value of the grants? Might be good advertising.
That's a good question.
They all come back to me. I'm not sure I understand the question.
We've had a
Well,
lot of
they said there's a lot of grant money, the good grant writers and blah, blah. How many dollars in grants have we I know there was 2.25
Four,
or
yeah,
something up on
yeah.
Grove Street and stuff.
Yeah.
Plus, I think the water plant on Grove Street, did that get
That,
a grant?
that wasn't a grant.
Wasn't a
That-
grant.
That was a state revolving fund, low interest
There's
loan.
gotta be a number that
Yeah.
the DPW has brought in grants over the last, pick a number.
Yeah, I'm thinking back off the top of my head of a handful that we've received down there, and I'm ballparking that you're looking at about $500,000 in competitive grants, traditional grants, what we think of. The MassWorks grant was very unique in the event that was something that we really worked for 2 years on to lay the groundwork, both in terms of the design, but also politically, because it's probably the most competitive grant program the state has in MassWorks. And with the development on Grove Street, we were able to make the case actually a year earlier than we thought. We thought it would take us 3 years to get that, and it really took us 2, so that was really good news. And I give a lot of credit to the department.
Still a
that-
grant. It's
It's
free
still,
money.
that is a competitive grant, but it's, so big that it kind of distorts the numbers. And then also, Chapter 90 money is a formula grant, so it's technically a grant, but that's about 1.1 million in road work. I think that this year, it's funny that you mentioned grants, not to elaborate too much, but this year with the ARPA money, I honestly don't believe, we've talked, and I have a call with Congressman Auchincloss on Thursday with the DPW staff, with Brutus and others. Even the federal infrastructure bill that just went through, the $1 trillion thing that, went through a few months, I honestly don't even know how much capacity we have to even apply or even do the work in an amount of time if we apply for grants. Some people have suggested we should hire grants administrators. Well, that sounds really good, but eventually the person who gets the money, somebody's got to go do the work. So, there's only so much we can do when we're already hiring a whole nother engineer just to deal with the grant money that we're getting from the federal government through ARPA. And so grants are challenging on that level. But I bet you, based on the numbers I'm calculating in my head, I bet you about $500,000 in grants came in last year to the DPW, outside of MassWorks.
I'll add to what Jamie said. I know, I think we all heard about the infrastructure bill, outside of ARPA, but, the second bill, with all that money. So I think for the water and wastewater side of things, Beaver Street Interceptor Project is a prime example. We're on the SRF approval list, right, to get a low interest loan. But we haven't heard yet, but I think some of that project is likely to either get money through
Yeah.
a grant or loan
point.
forgiveness. I'm not sure how they're gonna do it, but that's how they're funneling the pocket of money for the water and wastewater sections through the SRF
That's a
projects.
$25 million
Yeah,
chunk of change?
well, that was, that was before all of this other stuff.
Estimate.
Yeah,
You know,
so
7% inflation and all.
But to Brutus's team's credit, I mean, you're looking at a lot of recycling grants, right? There's a classic example of a competitive grant that Derek and his staff
Yeah.
go for and say they get $35,000. That's great. Couldn't be more thrilled. But a lot of the GIS stuff at 5,000, a little technical assistance grant at 10,000, all those are wonderful. And they do, every dollar offsets the tax bill at some point for citizens here, and you're still getting better services. But other than that, it's difficult to really reach for that many more grants. They're not offering that many more grant items either. I mean, there's some, but it's not really as expansive as what people think.
Okay, pressing on. Do we know what percentage of the town is Seward? Of those 240 miles of road?
I think it's-
Two-thirds?
Yeah, I would.
It's about two-thirds.
I would say
And
about
the
The
2/3.
water's a little higher.
Water's gotta be 90%?
Nah, it's probably 80. I wouldn't go
I would
that
s-
high.
Yeah, I'd say about 80.
Yeah,
Yeah.
70, we usually say three-quarters for water, but that's probably a little higher by now. I mean, we have extended a little bit extra, but with some of the projects, but then sewer's about two-thirds go to the Charles River Pollution Control District.
That's correct.
We now have 13, as Brutus refers to them, I think straws in the
Straws on the ground.
That's,
That's correct.
What- Not to inflame people that get a water ban every year, how many millions of gallons could we theoretically pump out of those 13 straws?
So our permit from
I know what the permit is, but
that's,
DEP
but
is-
that's,
but
that's,
th-
that's
that-
what it is.
That's our limit. That's as much
Yeah.
as we could pull out. I'd have to. I forget what the number is.
Three,
3.4.
I was gonna say
I wanna
3.4
say
million
it's 3.4.
gallons per day. And sewer's roughly around the same.
and did the Grove Street plant enhance what can be pumped up there? I know it came out red for a while or something.
So Grove Street, that whole well 6 was shut off since 2016 because of the high manganese numbers. So it definitely has helped us kind of manage our sources better. I want
Yeah.
to say. And I would add to it, what we, we're required by our permit to have a water conservation restriction. So that's a permit thing. I think last year, did we have a ban?
I was just
don't
gonna
remember.
say that, I know there's probably few people listening, but I heard
There's
it the other,
thousands
I
listening.
heard it the other night.
Just
Well,
not-
maybe the folks watching on Franklin TV, we didn't have any ban or conservation program last year. And based on the groundwater levels this year, I don't foresee it coming anytime soon.
Well, we always have the conservation.
Well, we have Wednesdays. The water conservation plan is mandated by our permit with the state.
Yeah.
We usually have those on Wednesdays, so you see the signs, but what I think he's referencing is the additional. yeah.
Full-on bans, yeah. So the only way we would have those if we go into a tier 2 drought, pretty much, tier 2 and higher, we need to start doing further restrictions.
And I have one pet peeve. Hey, it got me Sherman Avenue fixed a few years ago, so I'm good. Downtown cleanup of snow. My wife slid under my car. I understand that the downtown merchants shovel in front of their buildings.
They don't.
Well,
They
you can
don't.
walk the sidewalks. The problem is this high, sitting on the edge of the curb. You can't expect them to put it in buckets and haul it out back. And if you have two people in a car and you park downtown, passenger can't get out.
Yep.
Unless you park in the street, well, he or she gets out and goes in. And I know it's an ongoing issue, but that is, I did my own survey, the first big storm. I rode through North Attleboro, Medway, of all places, Milford,
Oh.
Framingham, Walpole. They're all done. You come here and there's snow everywhere. We gotta be better than that. I'm sorry. We're too good at everything else we do. We ought to be able to get rid of the stupid snow downtown. I don't need an answer, because I don't think there is one. I was just opinionating, opining, if you will. Bitching may be a better word. So, okay, I'm done.
One quick thing, I think, Jamie, that came up not too long ago. You mentioned that's a goal for the council.
Yeah.
To revisit that whole policy, whatever.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I think a couple quick things, and I respect Mr. Conley's bitching, so I won't try to bitch back, but it has to be a team effort. This cannot unilaterally and solely fall on just the DPW, 100% to get rid of snow on sidewalks. I would venture to believe one of the, probably the decisions that probably was not advantageous was 5 or 6 years ago, the town got rid of the bylaw that required merchants and residents within a certain district, downtown commercial, to help move the snow. And at the time, go back and look at the record, Mr. Nutting said his frustration was the pressure was to never give anybody a ticket or to enforce it. He said it at the meetings numerous times. Now we're in a position where we want to try to put it back to your comments, is on the goals. And I think if this is an issue that folks want, I think, you know, we can talk to the DPW director about changing priorities of operations for snow removal, but the expectation that the DPW is going to instantaneously get rid of all snow piles immediately within 24 hours is unrealistic without some sort of assistance. And the truth is that there just simply was not a lot of people doing their own shoveling of the walkway, where that results in our team having to go down the sidewalks with the plows. There is a staffing issue with it that's associated with it. We got to continue to work on it. I respect the opinions. I also think we have more road miles than a lot of those other communities that you mentioned. We have more sidewalk miles that we have to plow than some of those other communities that you mentioned. And so maybe that's how they're able to free up an additional amount of time to go do the downtown strip. And so I know it's an issue. We want to work on it. We want to try to make it better. But it just can't be all the DP. This is part of the problem they just mentioned in their presentation, is at the end, what are some of the drivers? It's just people always put everything that needs to happen, just give it to the DPW, they'll take care of it. And largely they do. This is an area of improvement that we obviously can still improve on.
Just
Okay,
one more comment.
One quick comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No.
It's just frustrating when you walk uptown and there's snow everywhere, but the sidewalk on Lincoln Street is plowed all the way to Daniels, crystal clear.
Yeah.
And uptown it's not. We had 200 people, plus or minus a few, Monday night, talking about revitalizing downtown and all that stuff, and we can't move the snow.
Yeah.
And that's only 25% of the year, I understand that, but it's just craziness.
I agree with you, it is craziness.
Yeah.
I'll go on, it is crazy.
Any other members want some questions of the DPW? John?
When you talked about enhanced street sweeping, does that just mean more frequent, or does that mean like different equipment, improved technology? What is
More frequently.
more frequently?
So we try to do it, we absolutely do it once a year, every single road. In the future, next year, we're looking at twice, and then from there, it might be 5, 6, 7, it might be once per month. Some other communities do it more frequently because they have a tighter area, like if you're closer to the city of Boston, they're just gonna hire a third-party contractor to come in, maybe every week, and they just come and sweep their streets because they're collecting litter, because they have so much, nothing against the cities in the area. That's typically, in people that I've talked to, their material that they collect in those areas are more litter than it is the silt or sand debris that we get in this area, or leaf litter. So it's gonna be interesting to see what the next year one will be, which is, you know, we're at year 4 now. If you think of it as year 6, but it's really year 1 of a new 5-year permit. That's where things are really gonna start to ramp up.
Do you have an estimate on like the percentage increase, the amount of sweeping you'll do, or is it constant?
As a goal, or as? to
Or as
abide
a
by the-
requirement to meet the,
Everything that we're
standards.
gonna be doing is to increase the purity of Franklin's drinking water and to reduce the amount of phosphorus that's gonna be contributed to the Charles. So whatever form or fashion that comes in, that's what we're gonna do.
excellent. Just
Sure.
one more.
Go ahead, John.
You mentioned no funding for trail maintenance, but I assume you do trail maintenance, right?
Actually, no.
No, okay.
You know, I think last year was a year where people were outside. It was very wet. The overgrowth was pretty intense. We got a lot of questions, complaints. Again, throw it on the DPW, they'll just do it. But we've asked Brutus, and it was a goal of the councils this year, was to look at a longer-term trail maintenance plan. Because honestly, traditionally, in most communities that I'm familiar with, there's usually a friends group
Right.
of volunteers that go out, the Friends of the Delcart Conservation Area, the Friends of the Dacey Field Complex, the Friends of such and such. And while we all have a lot of friends in Franklin, because it's a very friendly community, we do not have any volunteer groups that step up to the plate to go do some of this stuff. Normally, it's neighborhood folks. I've worked with friends groups many, many times. There's state forest friends groups. We don't have any of those. Because I think everybody expects the DPW to do it. I do know that Brutus has committed to a certain amount of funding in this year's budget. I think it's 20,000 or so to outsource some of it, so that it can get done more routinely, John. But it is something that we have to also think of in context of Maple Hill, in terms of how that parcel gets master planned and the connectivity. We can't just buy it and then do nothing with it, right? I think we would all agree, so. That's something that we gotta certainly focus on in the next couple of years, for sure.
Thank you.
Anything else? Tyrell?
Yeah, I had a quick one. And this might be a little bit out of the box, but I guess, how much of the funding that you guys get comes from the state? And part of why I asked that is we've had some, I think, governor, people that have been saying maybe they would reduce the oil, tax or the gasoline tax that they're charging, right? And so that would reduce, I would assume that would come to your budget, right? For filling potholes or maintaining the roads or whatever?
Is, Jamie, I'm gonna ask Jamie, is Chapter 90 directly funded through gas tax?
No, it's not. But I will say they did announce today, for that same reason, Tyrell, that the state is, I think the House passed a supplemental bill today to include 100 million more in Chapter 90 money because of those dynamics, both inflation, gas, diesel, et cetera. I think that they've heard the argument that we're gonna, if they didn't allocate more revenue, then the services would have declined, right?
Yep.
You know, you can just pave fewer potholes and roads if you have to pay more money in gas, right? I did hear today, actually just a couple hours ago, it looked like the legislature nixed the idea of getting rid of the gas tax for a certain time. But they did up the amount of money that was gonna get reimbursed to towns for some of those costs. Kathy may be able to correct me. I know earlier this year, Derek, we locked in a rate. Really looks like a genius decision now. But we locked in a rate through, I think, earlier this fiscal year when gas started to tick up a little. This was before the war in Ukraine started, well before. And I know that goes through June 30th, Kathy, is that right?
So we have locked in our gas rate through the end of the year. We've
Fiscal
committed-
year.
the end
Fiscal
of
year,
this
right?
fiscal year. We've committed to buying another 40,000 gallons of fuel. We typically buy 70,000 gallons of gas per year and about 30,000 of diesel fuel. So every year we work with Norfolk County Procurement and we purchase fuel through their contract. And we did lock in, but we're at the end of a 3-year contract with them. So they're working to rebid that, and so we haven't locked in on anything for next fiscal year yet. So we're right now talking to them and trying to determine, what our best course of action is.
Okay. All set? Any questions on this side?
I do. I just wanted to
Natalie?
talk a little bit about the utilities, so those are basically self-funding, right? So what's the math and kind of figuring that out every once in a while of like making sure you have the right utility rate, because what if, whatever, Waste Management all of a sudden upticks their contract, and how are you managing that? So can you just talk a little bit about what that process is of balancing it out and managing it with the rate that you charge?
So for the solid waste utility, Waste Management has a 5-year contract that we're currently in year 3 of. We're in year 3 of that contract. So we know what those costs are gonna be, because the only variable really is fuel for them, largely. So the costs are very stable on the hauling side and the disposal side. What's very volatile for the recycling division is the recycling disposal, or not disposal, the recycling portion of the solid waste division, because sometimes it costs us money to have it be sent to those end-use markets, and other times, there's been only 2 months since I've been in this current role that we've gotten reimbursed for our recycling that we've contributed to that facility. So that's the big factor in how we formulate our rate going forward for the next year. So the recycling is the biggest variable when it comes to that, but the other cost for the hauling and for the disposal of the solid waste is generally fixed.
Got it. And then I know on the water side and the sewer side, it's all based on consumption, but that rate is obviously a set piece. So how do you kind of do the same thing with that?
Yeah, we're constantly looking at, 5-year averages for the expense piece, and then what we have coming up for capital projects, because that's really kind of what drives the rate. So working with Chris Sandini in the finance department, kind of every year, we're constantly looking at that and making sure that, the rate that we're charging based on what we project for usage is enough to, fund our expenses and hopefully extra for capital as well.
Got it, okay, thanks. That's all my answer, yeah.
Anything, Nicole? Jenna, any questions?
I just have maybe back to the volunteer thing about trail cleanup. I know JB mentioned there's no like friends groups that do it, but has there ever been maybe like an annual request put out to ask for volunteers, maybe like once a year, or seasonal, like twice a year? Because I think I do a lot of hiking, and I hike at Blue Hills in Canton, and they usually do like just a call to, like, if you're on the email list, they'll ask like, hey, we're doing spring trailside cleanup, and a lot of people actually volunteer to come and do trailside like cleanup. I'm just wondering if the town has ever done anything like that.
That is a phenomenal question, and because you hike in the Blue Hills, they have an incredibly active friends group. Jenna, I'll take that suggestion back to Brutus and them. I think it's a great idea. The reason why it's a great idea is for those who volunteer on Earth Day, which is also coming up. That kind of was just an organic thing that started 20 years ago between Alan Earls, I believe, and Ryan Jetty, who's our rec director. And it just kind of slowly has taken off, where I believe they co-coordinate it. And then the Conservation Commission does the same thing for the Delcart, because they technically own the Delcart. But we'll have Doug and Derek and the staff go back and talk to Brutus about that and see if at least at a minimum the staff could try to spearhead one volunteer day to see if volunteers could come in. But if ultimately, even the Blue Hills or any parks, somewhere, somehow, there needs to be some sort of way for citizens to kind of organically help out, kind of co-coordinate that. I know the Earth Day is kind of limited in terms of where they go. There's some hot spots. It's trash on the side of the roads. But maybe we could at least, spearhead it and just see, maybe it'll take off. So we'll take that suggestion back for sure. I think it's a good one.
Great. Anything else,
Thank you.
Jenna?
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. I have a few questions, starting with the grounds division, I guess, and you mentioned several other places about outsourcing. And several years ago, I think Brutus mentioned that they outsourced the high school grounds maintenance, so you were doing it, not the other schools, but the high school, because of minimum wage laws, and not minimum wage, but prevailing wage laws and stuff like that. So obviously we're spending money to hire people to do that. So where's the savings? More of like a time savings for staff, or, how does that work out, contracting that out?
The taskings associated with completing the maintenance for the landscape of the high school greatly exceeds what we could do with our current capacity for staffing. So we would have to hire additional employees to take care of those taskings at the high school and at Horace Mann. So the cost saving comes at the benefit of the reduced cost of contracting out for people who specialize in that. That doesn't accurately summarize it. Who are able to bring in a vast number of people over a short period of time to complete those taskings, versus Franklin DPW, who is consistently hitting the moving target of what we can do and what we can accomplish.
Okay,
Through Mr. Chair, we did negotiate in the last contract, the first time ever, to the ability to outsource grounds almost in its entirety. You know, the challenge out of the gate doing that is you need an upfront amount of money, to be able to go out to bid to do the contract, yet you still have the personnel on staff. So there really is no immediate cost savings. So you have to kind of time it right where, you know, I think with the stormwater utility is a classic example, right? Where if that were able to go through, you could take certain staff that have clearly prioritized, they want to do higher level work, not just buzz back and forth mowing lawns all day. And so I know Brutus in the budget presentation for this year on the wish list is to invest in that upfront cost to make that transition, while hopefully in the future, some of those staff would move over to the stormwater division, just like we just did, you know, earlier this year within the DPW budget. So it's kind of a careful tactic. And in talking to Bruce about it a couple weeks ago, obviously the inflation, the wages, you know, going out to bid for this now is going to be an interesting exercise, or at least in the next year, to see exactly what wage rates are. I think we made an assumption a few years ago what it would be, but there's no question with inflation rising and wages rising, as they should. I'm not debating that they shouldn't, by the way. Obviously, that metric could change.
Right, okay. Some questions on the roads. And I know you, the roads division, highway division with the sidewalk maintenance, and while it's not the construction component per se, some sidewalks are asphalt versus concrete. First of all, the cost differential, I don't know if you do it by mile, square foot, or linear foot. And secondly, what determines where a concrete sidewalk goes? I noticed downtown I get, but there's some like up behind Dean College and other places versus just using asphalt. Anybody know that?
I think the savings is over 4 to 1 for a concrete versus an asphalt sidewalk.
Asphalt is,
Installation cost,
Yeah,
every time.
installation cost.
costs more for concrete? Or
Much more for concrete than it does
okay.
for, much more.
And then for the question about.
What
you know,
determines what, yeah, why not use asphalt everywhere?
I'm assuming that's a planning
It's a-
board
well,
decision?
yeah.
Actually, I don't know.
We've determined as a town that, speaking of downtown revitalization, that we don't want asphalt in downtown, we want granite curbing. It's a vanity decision, it's a sustainability decision, because it unquestionably lasts a lot longer. And so I think many years ago, and I don't want to speak specifics because I don't know exactly where the lines are, but if you think of the downtown commercial zoning district, as well as I believe C1 and a couple of other spots have been determined to be within historic districts, the downtown district, the C1 district. And so the planning board over a long period of time, and I give the former chair, Tony Padula, a lot of credit, he stuck to that pretty heavily, because they've gotten asked a lot over the years for waivers, because the developer doesn't want to pay it,
Sure.
because of big savings. But I think overall, the downtown looks much, much better and is obviously structurally much more sound for a longer term with the granite curbing.
I
Where
agree.
the exact lines are, I don't know, but it's also about traffic flows. More people that walk on those sidewalks than out on Lincoln Street, all the way up near Daniels, and I think that's why you get asphalt in some of those
Nice
more
and
outlying
loud.
areas. I'm just for reference.
And a few questions on the refuse budget, or however you want to describe it. One is, first a reminder, because I think Jamie and Chris were amenable to splitting out recycling versus solid waste in the budget. I think it's one line item, if I'm correct. If we ask how much is for recycling, how much is for solid waste, I think it's one line item.
I believe so.
And I brought up splitting it out one time. I think you guys were okay with that at the time. On the operating budget documents?
Just keep going. I'm looking it up real quick.
Sure. And so that was one thing. And also, we haven't heard a lot about it in the past year maybe, but for most of my time on the committee, early on, it was like we made money on the recycling. Then it broke even, and it was a cost, and it was this big thing. Even Jamie had mentioned a number of times to the committee, you guys got to talk about recycling, you know, cost of getting out of hand. Has that leveled off, or are we still facing almost like a really high-cost situation for the recycling? And if so, I mean, what are the options? at times you must have said, well, what do you do if you don't recycle? I'll then throw it in the trash and drive up those costs. So I'm just curious about, has the recycling dilemma, has any pressure been taken off that over the past year? And if so, why? And even if it hadn't, what else are you gonna do with recycling? Because we do a very good job in this town, I think, of recycling.
We do a tremendous job in this town. We have a contamination rate of under 7%, which is the best in Norfolk County. We've recently had an audit where they take all of our recycling over a period of time, they spread it out, they go through it by hand, they weigh what's not recyclable versus what is recyclable, and Franklin's was the best in Norfolk County at under 7%. So we do a tremendous job, and that helps lower our costs
Okay.
for, in general, for our recycling as it goes to the facility. I would not summarize it as leveling off. It continues to be volatile. What was traditionally, over a year ago, a significant cost has now, about 3 months ago, we were just making a couple $100 off of our recycling. And now it's gone back in the other direction, and it's costing us about $5,000 a month approximately for the commodities market of the materials that we're recycling. And this is seen even in the recycling center. So we have our cardboard compactor up there. There was a period of time where that was quote unquote making money for us, because during the COVID pandemic, deliveries were out of sight and people were literally stealing cardboard, not from Franklin, but just as like people would steal copper back in the day. They were stealing cardboard so that they could bring it to a recycling facility and make their own money on it. So I would not summarize it as leveling off, because it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next couple months now that our delivery is going to be as high as they were. Are we going to continue to make the money quote unquote on the cardboard or not? That remains to be seen, but the costs, in my opinion, are much more reasonable, and I hope they continue to go down that trend.
Jamie?
I mean, Derek explained that extremely well. I think 4 years ago, we were dealing with China on the national sword policy, and they threw a huge curveball at everybody on that. I think we did predict at the time by about 2021, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I think the 2 years in the pandemic, if you recall, there were recycling plants being built out in the Midwest to compensate for that. So to Derek's point, it's leveled off, but then the waste management problem has also come in. I know a lot of, it seems like almost on a monthly basis, we're putting out the trash is delayed, because that now is the issue with trash and recycling. And I think, as Derek pointed out, it's pretty much all market-based. So China still holds a lot of the cards. We'll see how that all comes out based on what's going on in the geopolitical world. But it's just like fuel and petroleum. It's a global commodity at some point. And you can't get much better of a recycling rate here. So I don't know how much we're going to be able to save costs. But to Natalie's question earlier, fortunately, we have not had to raise a lot of rates in the last few years. I mean, we did do a water rate because of the water treatment plant and paying off those borrowing. But we base those rates, and when they go up and when they've gone down, they have gone down in the past based on the market fluctuations of all these materials.
Yeah, I do remember you saying China back then seemed to be the villain in all this.
They were the villain. I mean, it depends on who the villain is, but I mean, maybe we're the villain for dumping so much stuff in China. I don't know. But I mean, they completely threw a curveball at everyone in the global market because they said, we're not taking your anymore.
Okay. And one final question on to the recycling center. And I know, Jamie, you've gone over this, I think, in the past with, we have to work with the state to expand the territory up there, or the footprint of the recycling center. There's state property and there's cleanup involved. That's all gonna remain recycling once that expands, right?
Yep. So, last
timeframe.
last week, the Conservation Commission approved the work that the town is required to do on the SNET Trail, which was part of the deal of the land transfer with the state. Hopefully later this year, when that work gets done. That's a great example, by the way, of work that our employees want to be a part of, right? As opposed to, again, the outsourcing of just the grounds. And it's more visible, more exciting, more community advantageous work. When that gets done, hopefully this fall, then we'll finalize the land transfer, go to the Registry of Deeds. I'm anticipating a year and a half from now. the land will actually be ours, and the state will get the open space that was ours to, adjacent to Franklin State Forest. And then we have to start the extraordinarily exciting topic of a solid waste master plan, right? Pumped up, solid waste master plan. And DEP will require us to do that, and will include, the biggest feature is we're gonna have to line the pile of garbage that we're now inheriting on that parcel right next to the recycling center. Once we do that, as part of that, we will outline and design a new recycling center as well on the same parcel that's there. It'll be able to go way far back, and will obviously prevent a lot of contamination that has occurred decades ago on that parcel next to where the recycling center is. So in the capital plan, people have seen it. I usually say probably 2 to 5 years.
Okay.
Somewhere in that range. Once the SNET work gets done and we can transfer the land.
Okay, yeah, that was one of my follow-ups, is on the time frame. When you say line that area, is that similar to the capping of landfills
Yep.
that went on in the 70s and 80s?
Yep, and we'll probably, I'm sure at the time, we'll probably put, solar technology, a bunch of other stuff on top of it, like a lot of communities have done, and things of that sort. But we'll hire a consultant with our staff to do that whole solid waste master plan.
Okay, so I don't think I have any more questions. Any follow-ups, Mr.?
I have some texts that I got with questions. Lane miles versus road miles, which was on one of the slides. And so out here, 140 is 2 lane miles to 1 road mile?
So you can think of center lane miles, which would be the center lane, and then typically I would refer to it as curb miles. So 1 mile of road with 2 passes would have 2 curb miles, 1 center lane mile.
Okay, so it's the width of, 140 is gonna be 2 lane miles per mile, per physical mile.
It can get more complicated than
Yeah.
that based on the formula that you're
Yeah,
using,
all right,
but
all right. So-
generally speaking, curb mile versus lane mile.
And the other
Center lane.
question that came in was on the water sewer. Apparently, there was some mention of 2.6 million gallons a day for water, and 2.7 million gallons a day for sewer. How can there be, I suppose, I don't know, there's a
Not sure.
difference. This is coming from Mr. Franklin Matters, I might add.
So I would, not every, most water customers are on sewer, but not everyone. And similarly,
Yeah.
there are some people who are on sewer who aren't on water. So that's kind of where the difference is. And also on the sewer side, there's infiltration and inflow. So groundwater, if it rains, sometimes we get that into the sewer. And that's what, our capital projects try to eliminate. So that way we're not paying for that sewage that's, not ours. We don't want to be paying to treat groundwater. We don't want to be paying to treat the rain that gets into the sewer system. So we're constantly looking at capital projects to eliminate those sources of infiltration and inflow, I&I, as people call them.
And I have one more comment. I understand now why Brutus usually looks pretty good when he comes here. There's 3 people there that it was well done tonight.
Thank you.
Yes, I agree, thank you. Any other comments or questions before we say thank you to the night for the DPW? So that's it for the DPW presentation. And I believe we have stabilization fund update, Jamie, or do you just want to direct our attention to the chart or anything particular you want to add? Thanks, guys.
No, I mean, I think it's the same as it probably was at the last meeting. Yeah, Carrie's nodding her head, yes. It is what it is.
Does the budget stabilization reflect the million? Because that hasn't been approved yet, is that what?
Next week,
Okay.
next week. It was, I should say it was approved by the council subcommittee.
Right.
But it hasn't been approved, authorized by the full council.
Okay.
Yep.
Any questions on stabilization funds? And that brings
I'm
us,
sorry, real quick.
Sure.
When we get these types of updates, it would be great to be like, I don't know, have a benchmark of like, here's where they are now, here's where they were, I don't know, at some relevant point, and then maybe a goal. Because otherwise I forget, and I'm like, these are just numbers on a piece of paper. So it would just be nice to have some context when we get these updates.
like as of,
as of, and like, what maybe, like, what is our goal for them? Like, I think for some of them, we have goals, like, we wanna add this much, or, you know, so it'd be great to be like, it was this time last year, and our annual goal is to increase it by 200, so we can see like, yep, we're reaching our goal.
We do have fiscal policies to that effect, but there's some flexibility in that, like the fire truck stabilization, we decide not to add to this year, correct?
Well, first of all, they're policies, right? They're not laws, so you're not forced to do it. In fact, the OPEB presentation last week, Dan Sherman mentioned that one of the benefits of our policy was if there really was a terrible, terrible year, you know, there's nothing mandating that we have to put 700 plus 50,000 every year in the fund. That is a safety net. I was glad he said that because nobody else does, and I think it all the time, but it was good to hear him validate that. You know, it's a great question, Ally. I mean, I'll talk to the staff. You know, maybe we could add in some pointers. One of the issues is, like, general stabilization is a great example, right? The Dust Bowl account. Usually auditors' rule of thumb is 5% of your operating expenses. You know, I don't know if we generally really have a target we always meet. We may not be at that 5% all the time. The recreation fields, you know, it came up at the capital subcommittee is a really good example where, you know, folks looked at the math and said, oh, wait, you know, we need this much by 2027, right? But we're off. But the reality is that we have to wait until we get closer to the date to see how much our field's going to be. Do we need them? Is it really 2030? Is it 2027? So we can add in a little bit of context, and maybe we can just continue to have a work in progress for a few meetings where if what we put up there doesn't meet your expectations or whatever, it doesn't help, you know, we can continue to refine it. Some of them are challenging. Property acquisition, you know, I mean, that's just, it's hard to deposit money into that account. But we'll try to come up with some language to try to give it a little bit more context.
Yeah, I don't want to add a lot of work to it, because I
Yeah.
get that you guys do a lot of work, and I super appreciate it. I just, a little bit of context, even that, of like, those couple of words of like, goal is, loose goal, 2027 is, you know what I mean? Yeah, that'd be great, thank you.
Like some bullets, like the MEC thing is obvious because it's, well, we're just preparing for when we
Sure.
get back to full cost or something,
Yep.
so some of the prompt,
You got it.
Memories, yeah.
memory, thank you.
You got it.
Well, I think that's it. I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion's been made, seconded. Any discussion on the motion? We'll need a roll call vote on this as well.
John,
Yes.
Tyrell? Yes. Jenna?
Yes.
Natalie?
Yes.
Nicole is yes, George?
Yes.
And Bill.
Aye. We have adjourned, 7-0. Thank you, folks. Thank you again to
Thank you.
DPW.
Thank you for having us.